It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change your attitude, change your life. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life brings you interviews with some of the most inspirational and influential people in the world. It's our goal to educate and empower you so you can live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. We have another great show for you today. Joining me is Dr. John Gray, a relationship expert and best-selling author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Dr. Gray is here today to discuss how men and women can improve their relationship by acknowledging the differences between their needs, desires, and behaviors. Dr. Gray's books have sold over 50 million copies around the world. Welcome, Dr. Gray. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure.
John, it's been reported that approximately 50% of first marriages today end in divorce, and that percentage is higher for second and third marriages. You've been working in the field of interpersonal relationships for many years and have seen the situation evolve. So what do you believe is occurring? What are the forces driving those statistics?
Well, there's many forces, but our new challenges are women in the workplace. The more educated a woman is, the more financially independent she is, the higher the risk of divorce, the higher her stress levels, and the lower her happiness. Now, these are just averages, but what happens is when women are in the workplace, it stimulates a different set of hormones that are very beneficial to men, but not so beneficial to women. And it's the relationship, the quality of relationship at home, it's personal relationships that stimulate a hormone called oxytocin, which lowers stress for women. Whereas workplace stresses tend to stimulate testosterone, which is beneficial for men, not as beneficial for women. Men need to make about 10 times more testosterone. Women need to make about 10 times more estrogen. And the more independent you are, the more self-sufficient you are, the less estrogen you make. It increases your stress reactions. It causes you to feel overwhelmed. It prevents you from good sleep. And so that's what's going on. You know, it's not like people have less relationship skills than their parents.
You know, it's interesting because I always thought that our relationships were struggling more today rather than our parents, because in our parents' generation, their roles were more clearly defined. I'm 52, and looking back at my parents' relationship, my mom stayed home, my father worked, and they knew what to expect from each other. At 52, I'm one of the first women who has really benefited from the changes that have occurred for females in our society. And I'm also the mother of two boys, a 20-year-old and a 23-year-old. And I'm hoping that it will be different for them as they age and they create relationships. Will it be different for my sons moving forward because I am a different woman than my mother?
Oh, yeah. The kids today, you know, I've just finished a book called Conscious Men, because men are having huge challenges today in terms of their relationships, but also their stress levels, their career, finding their place in the world. And my book that's coming out next year is called Boy Crisis. There's a huge crisis with boys. You know, they're boys in their 20s are 6 times more likely to commit suicide than girls. 3 to 5 times more boys have learning difficulties and learning challenges today. Just looking at the broad picture, we see that as far as college graduates, generally in most universities, 2 women to 1 man graduates. Men are falling behind, and this is bad news for men, but bad news for women, because women are looking for men who, in a sense, have kind of an equal level of education and income, and they're not finding them. So it's challenging. These are new challenges, and it's not all doom and gloom. The statistics are, but when we understand how to provide a good kind of emotional support for women and a good kind of emotional support for men in relationship, these problems are solved. But it's literally like we have a new software, and we have to learn that software. There's a learning curve.
So, John, let's back up for a moment. For our listeners who may not be familiar with your work, where did the idea of Mars and Venus come from, and what do they represent?
Well, of course, Mars is the masculine energy, and Venus is the feminine. And it's associated with love and beauty, and Mars is associated with being the protector, the warrior. And these are two energies which are very real, and they're in both men and women. But when women have too much of the Mars energy, so to speak, which would be testosterone, it does lower their estrogen. That does raise their stress levels. That does inhibit their ability to relax and to feel love. Her needs become different. Her need for romance, need for communication, need for more help and support in a relationship increases. So the demands on men are different than they were in my parents' generation. In some situations it worked really well, but it didn't work that way for everybody. You know, there's millions of mothers who had to go to their husbands to say, "Oh, can I spend this much money? Can I do this?" You know, asking permission to spend money is like a child going to a parent, and women are just like, "Wait a second, this is too confining for me." So they create a lot of change, and with every good change comes a new set of problems, and that's what we're facing right now. Men, that basically testosterone is increased when you feel successful. We're going through a crisis for men. Their average 50-year-old man has half the testosterone he had as a young man. But as women have sort of joined the workplace, they need men less at home for the traditional things that men were needed for as providers. And in our relationships, men are kind of looking for, okay, what am I supposed to do here? It's not enough anymore to be a good provider, particularly if a woman is providing for herself. It doesn't create the same kind of response in her. You talk about attitude changing your life. It really is everything. And when I look at it from the point of view of gender, men, through their actions, when men know what to do that can be successful, that actually changes a man's attitude. But for women, taking action doesn't change her attitude. Often causes her to feel more resentful, more exhausted, more tired, and she needs to focus, ideally, on her own internal world. How can I change my attitude to come back to a more forgiving, more accepting, more appreciative, more trusting place, as opposed to depending on the external world so much for that? These are qualities that are internal, which is our ability to love. And for women to know the greatest gift they can give a man in a relationship is this shift in attitude. It's not so much what you do for a man that makes him feel loved. It's who you are. It's coming back to that most loving, appreciative self. But for men, it's learning to do the right thing. And it's all about learning this new software of how to provide the kind of support women need today. So these ideas began to emerge around 1980 is when I began developing them. And it was in reaction to the strong feminist perspective, which at that time, and still to some extent today, was denying that differences exist. As soon as you start denying that differences exist, you create a sense of blindness to reality. Men and women are very, very different. And if we don't understand those differences in a positive way, then we constantly blame our own unhappiness on our partners. We want to change them. We try to control them. We try to adjust them, remake them, so to speak. And yeah, we need to make changes to make our relationships better, but making men wrong and men making women wrong, that's not a healthy thing. So my message, Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus, is kind of a reaction to that phenomena, which is still going on, which is a society which is trying to make women into men and blaming men if they're not like women. These ideas are really, really destructive to relationships.
And John, I think a big problem occurs in a relationship when people believe that a partner should think the same way that they do. So for example, if something occurs and me as a wife, I think a certain way, and if my husband doesn't think the same way I do, there can automatically become an issue in the relationship, and over time it can start to fall apart. So with what you're teaching us today, with this knowledge, how can we understand these differences and allow them to be part of our relationship?
Well, that's basic Mars-Venus 101, what you just described. I saw it over and over and over, which is women expecting men to react the way women do, men expecting women to react the way men do. And when they don't, then we often take it personally. One of the best concepts of Men Are from Mars, when I get the feedback, is the idea that men go to their cave. For men to cope with stress, quite often, really, the biological response to low levels of stress for men is to detach from emotions. The biological response for women under moderate stress is to increase emotions 8 times. So when women become more emotional, men tend to think she's making a big deal out of it, when really she's processing stress differently. And for men, they detach. So he pulls away and she thinks something's wrong, which is actually the process of detaching from emotions means to disconnect from emotions lowers his estrogen so his testosterone can rebuild. Men have to sustain this level of healthy testosterone. Otherwise, they get heart attacks, they have low energy, they become moody, they become angry, they become violent. All this negativity that comes from men, ironically, happens when men's testosterone converts into estrogen. We think of these characteristics of men as having too much testosterone. Well, that was all mistakes. It's the male hormones that make men behave in a loving way, a motivated way, an inspired way, and it's the female hormones in men that throw them way out of whack, and vice versa. When women have too many male hormones, they can't sleep at night, they're feeling overwhelmed, they can't relax, they're not as loving, they're unappreciative of what they have in their lives. It's like looking at what's not there instead of what is there. And that's all about attitude. Our attitude is, and I love the show because we focus on our whole perspective in life is what kind of attitude do we create. It's how we look at the world that determines how the world affects us. But that's in the mind, and we have to learn and be aware of that and practice that. With the advent of drugs, we discovered that drugs can completely change your state of mind. We know that you take a pill and you can feel completely different. That's because the biology, to a great extent, determines psychology, and psychology, to a great extent, determines biology. So they work hand in hand. And if you're practicing positive thinking and doing the right things, but you're not getting the right nutrition, the right support, you don't have the right hormonal balance, you can't sustain a positive attitude. It's really, really unfortunate. You can try, but it doesn't sustain if you don't have the right hormones being released in your body.
So, John, how do we keep a relationship alive? A very common problem, and I experienced this when my 23-year marriage ended, is that over time, you're no longer in that honeymoon phase where everything is exciting and there's all this passion, and you don't see your partner the way you did in the beginning, and life becomes somewhat routine. And what happens is when a relationship ends and your ex-partner, your ex-spouse goes on and meets someone new, he or she behaves in a way so unlike the way that person did in the relationship. And it's very hard to watch because the person is doing everything you wanted to have done in your relationship, which would have saved it. So how do we keep these relationships invigorated, alive, so that they don't end and you don't go out and treat a stranger the way you should be treating the person who has spent many years with you?
Well, that's a wonderful observation. It's actually very, very common. You'll see this particularly with men. It takes a little longer for women to bounce back after a relationship, but for men, it can be very, very quick. You can take a 70-year-old man and he gets a divorce and meets a younger woman, and suddenly he is alive. And it doesn't even have to be a younger woman. I'll put that in there as well. But the younger they are from a man's point of view, the more innocent they are, the less jaded they are, so they're more appreciative. But let's just say it's somebody the same age. And what happens is you meet somebody new. Newness stimulates a set of brain chemicals that don't get stimulated once familiarity is set in. So newness stimulates dopamine. Familiarity stimulates serotonin, which is kind of a comfortable thing, but it's not exciting. And today, we want excitement along with comfort. We want passion. You bring those two brain chemicals together and you get a passionate relationship. But the relationships do change over time, but they don't have to become complacent. That's where familiarity has set in, and we don't have the skills to stimulate the right hormones. Dopamine surges when you have a new experience. And if there's a sexual chemistry and there's newness, you literally have an amount of dopamine which is similar to what's produced from heroin. So in the beginning of a relationship, in the honeymoon phase, it is a bit like a drug trip, and it won't be sustained in exactly the way for 95% of people. What happens is you go to another phase, which is you're more familiar, but you begin to discover what real love is. And what real love is being able to really open your heart to someone who's not perfect. That's our challenge. But you can't sustain opening your heart to someone who's disappointed you or frustrated you or literally is not new and different if you don't have wisdom to how to balance your own hormones. So the challenge there for women, for example, to keep the romantic passion there, because the more stressed women are, again, as women go into the workplace, their stress levels, research shows, double. And when they come home, become 4 times greater than what they used to be. Women are really much more challenged today than ever before. And to help cope with that, as I mentioned, we need a new software. Women need to learn how to create romance. An example is you say to your husband, you say, next Saturday, here's 3 things I'd love to do. Will you pick one and take me? You have to learn how to ask what you want and how to create romance by motivating men. Men are not naturally motivated to do that. Men are motivated to solve problems and fulfill requests. But the whole art of asking is very challenging for women. Nobody's taught them to do it. We don't have generations of mothers who know how to ask for help. What happens is that women typically will start pointing out what's not working as opposed to focus on what is working and continuing to ask for a little more. Men don't know what women require. Men assume if I'm a good provider, I go to work, that's all I have to do. You have to do more. Today's woman requires more. And the good news here is it doesn't have to be a huge, big thing. Often when women are dissatisfied, men feel like, oh, there's nothing I can do to make her happy. She's so demanding. When really, if men could understand women's hormones, doing lots of little things builds up a hormone called oxytocin. And then she starts to feel safer. Then she can start to depend on him more. And if with some instruction on how to ask for help, and he realizes that if I give a little help, she's going to be very appreciative. Quite often when women do ask for help, they come from a place of, why should I appreciate it? I've done more for you than you've done for me. And there's almost kind of a surge of resentment that she has to ask. So these are things that most people are not going to find on their own, and they're going to get divorced. This takes somebody outside that relationship pointing out, hey guys, there's a new software. You're using the old software and it's not working.
John, we are out of time, so if you'd like to learn more about Dr. John Gray or about his books, you can visit MarsVenus.com. John, in our final moments, what would you like to leave our listeners with?
Some practical tips. They don't change your life totally, but they will certainly help your relationships. 3 things men can do. The most important thing women need is to feel heard. You say, tell me more. You say, what else? And you say, help me understand that better. What women can do for men to boost their testosterone is, that makes sense. Oh, good idea. And you're right. These are kinds of phrases that you can use every day over and over and over, and they soften the edges of the tension that starts to build up. We can create more love.
John, thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing years of wisdom to help us create loving, lasting relationships.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back. Hi, this is Joan Herman, host of Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Did you know that Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life has a free monthly digital magazine that can be read online or emailed to your inbox? Every month, nationally recognized leaders in their field provide information to educate, inspire, and motivate you. We believe in a holistic approach to life, incorporating mind, body, and spirit. Check out a copy of Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life 24/7. Visit cyacyl.com and be sure to tell your friends. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that the information provided are the opinions of our guests and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on the site, listen to past shows on demand, read the digital magazine, and be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.